Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Superpower and Sidekick. I'm Kim Ang.
And I'm Cindy Kay. And we're here to team with spirit to live a life beyond our imagination.
Yes, indeed. So, what's the today's topic, Cinda?
I want to talk about that we live in a toxic world. And I think that's one reason why it's so important that we all wake up. I'm coming off of some migraines that I get whenever I'm around toxic substances. And so it's what's on my list for the day.
That was fully loaded.
Well, not necessarily empaths, but definitely highly sensitive people. We can get at our own little HSPs. I call it princess in the pea or canary in the coal mine. It depends on what perspective you're looking at it for, because I know that I am not alone in having some chemical sensitivities and with environmental chemicals, with stuff that they build our houses out of, stuff that they put into feminine and all personal care products. Today our fragrances aren't made out of essential oils and things like that. Most of the times, most fragrances are made out of petroleum based chemical synthetics with formaldehyde fixers just to make sure they last a long time. And I have severe reactions, migraines, sometimes even seizures and convulsions. I've lost communication. And the more that I have been honest about my experience, people have come out of the woodwork and gone, me too, me too, me too. That there's a lot of people, but it does seem to be the more highly sensitive of us that are coming across these problems first. I do not in any way think that these are not noxious chemicals. They have labels on them that they are VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And they sell them to us saying that they're harmless, and people are running 5 Scentsy burners and a couple Glade plugins and Febreze and slice all the beds 2 or 3 times a week, and you have no idea what you're doing to your family, to your children, to your pets, to yourself. I do think a lot of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and other unknown illnesses are actually in this space of environmental illness.
Yeah, because I remember reading an article about one of the airlines. They somehow switched their uniforms, and then all these employees kept getting like these weird uh, symptoms and stuff, and they couldn't figure it out what was happening. And then finally they determined that it was the uniforms and all the chemicals that were sprayed into those fabrics.
It was the formaldehyde and forever chemicals that were sprayed on top, so that way they wouldn't, if they spilled a Coke in air, it wasn't going to stain the outfit or these kind of things. But what they don't tell you, the CDC has formaldehyde labeled as a sensitizer. So if you are exposed to a lot of formaldehyde, you actually sensitize to other things in your environment. I was working for women's retail at one point, and I lost hundreds of foods. I could not eat foods because they started being migraine triggers. And I didn't realize at the time it was because I had my head in formaldehyde every single day, pulling those clothes out and then steaming them to go out on the floor was causing me to sensitize to everything in my environment. And when you're wearing those clothes, you are all of our skin is the most absorbent um, organ on our body. Anything that we put in it does go into our body, including clothing.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, and I think the medical community is kind of not really attuned to.
They will gaslight the heck out of you
Yeah.
because they themselves are not educated on it, and their lab are saying nothing's wrong with you, nothing's wrong with you, nothing's wrong with you, because they're not educated at all. There's a few
Mm,
who are, and I'm not saying that the medical community didn't have the heart for it. I think a lot
mm.
of them have the heart for it.
Mhm.
I think that a lot there is conflict of interest with the companies that are supplying our pharmaceuticals that are also educating our doctors. And because they are also the makers of those petroleum based chemicals, they do not want to out themselves, and they will actually do a lot of work to shut people like myself and others down when we start calling it out.
So, how can the average person be more informed about this so that if they start getting certain symptoms and they can't figure out what's wrong, the doctors are saying there's nothing wrong with you?
One, you can
Um,
get a hold of me and I can explain how I took the same concept of elimination diet for foods, and I applied it to my environment, and I was able to find the cause of a year and a half migraine and almost dying. It was a new mattress and the clothing in my closet. um but I had to do an elimination diet to be able to figure out what it was. So I think the first thing people actually need to start doing is reading their ingredients, including
mhm.
on all of your cleaning products, all of your makeup, all of your personal care. Your One of the most toxic things on this planet is laundry fumes. You can ease your toxic load right now by buying free and clear. Now, I go one step closer. Mine is actually made out of soap nuts, so it's super clean. But you can make the one effort of just going fragrance free, and it's going to knock down a whole bunch of toxicity in your home. And not only that, but whenever you're running a dryer, you're not just making your own home toxic, you're shooting it all out. I can't walk
Mhm.
in some neighborhoods because of laundry fumes. Luckily, where I live now, it's sparse. We're very rural, very country, but also a lot of the people here are hippies, and they are very aware that that is killing our planet. And most of us don't use those things. There's a few, but I can at least walk outside. Fibromyalgia, feeling feeling stress and tension in your neck. Almost always people think it's their stress life. It very well can be the fragrances that you're spraying on yourself every day. And the way to find out is to not spray yourself a couple days and see if that tight neck goes away. That you actually have to eliminate what you're using to see if that could be the culprit.
Yeah, reading ingredients on everything is important. And a lot of the chemicals that are toxic to us is labeled as fragrance, which is a
And they
very
just
big
and that they've got an
category.
umbrella word,
Yeah,
fragrance.
fragrance.
Also, you almost have to buy non-fragranced rather than unscented. Unscented, they will
Right.
actually use a fragrance to cover whatever the product actually smells like. So it's even tricky. So you've got to read the ingredients, and if it says fragrance, put the product down and don't buy it. If they don't tell you what every single ingredient in their fragrance is, don't buy that product. Because most of them at the natural grocery stores and organic grocery stores and stuff like that, if you buy your shampoos and conditioners and deodorants and stuff there, they will break down if they do have like cedar and rose, or they'll say essential oils on it. It'll clarify what they make their fragrance from. But
Hmm.
if they don't want to tell you, they're going to tell you it's proprietary.
Yeah, one of the really good documentaries I saw on Netflix was called Stink. I don't know if you've heard of
No,
that
that was a
one.
great movie. They did a very good job with that.
Yeah, and I think that was when, after watching that, I became more aware of all these chemical sensitivities that you're talking about and how toxic everything in our home is. So after that, I just looked through every single shampoo bottle, every
Well,
stuff that's in the kitchen, under the kitchen sink to clean our households. Make sure looking at the ingredients,
that
getting
is
rid
one
of.
side of it. The other side, that is one really big side. And people can, it took me 7 clear outs before I quit having migraines. So it might take you more than one. When I figured all this out, because sometimes it was just because my mom had stored some of my children's clothes and they had laundry detergent from the 1970s in there. Um, But the other component of it is how we build our houses and what's going on in our houses. We are building our houses with more and more and more formaldehyde with all of the compressed wood and the other kinds of products. And we're using forever chemicals, the PFAS. Um, so that's one aspect. So we're creating our world out of something that is causing us to sensitize to our world. The other thing the CDC calls a sensitizer is mold. And there's a whole nother subgroup of people like me. I luckily so far I purposely do not hang around mold because I know it has the exact same effect as formaldehyde. But the homes, all the homes right now, either if they're brand new, you are sitting in formaldehyde. Period. It is not off-gassed. The new cars, I was shopping for a car and I had a Nissan dealer opened up a new one and I literally convulsed because I have problems with formaldehyde. Um, so we are encasing ourselves in either mold because if it's an old house, or and we don't know how to clean out mold properly, or or having proper ventilation in a home so it doesn't get mold, and then also what we are putting into our building products and the formaldehyde. And also we have a lot of formaldehyde in our, I mentioned it before but I'm going to say it again, the mattresses. Brand new mattresses are completely covered in formaldehyde. So we are swimming in this stuff and then wondering why we are starting to react to our environment. So it's twofold.
Yikes. Nothing is safe anymore.
Well, it's the houses and what we are encasing ourselves in that's actually causing the problem. We wouldn't become problematic with some of the petroleum based synthetics had it not been mixed with formaldehyde. But this is all caused by greed. All of our synthetics, including our clothing, if they didn't make it out of cotton, they made it out of hemp until powers that be that we're going to make a lot of money off of petroleum outlawed and turned the world against hemp by the war on drugs to be able to accept something very toxic into their lives because it made them money. So it was very for nefarious reasons.
Well, I guess the only way to counter that is to educate ourselves.
And to start spending our money on things that do not have those chemicals and synthetics in it. Don't buy cheap clothing that was made from polyester and all of these um, petroleum based synthetics. Don't buy them because they cover them in formaldehyde so you don't burn up. It's not going to be a healthy mix for you. I've watched since they switched to like petroleum based draperies and things like this. The fire department has shown the difference in how things burn and how much hotter it burns, and it's because of our synthetic products in our home that it can burn so fast, and they have to put those chemicals on them so that way they're not just gone like that. I have a polyester thing behind me right now. But none of my clothing is polyester. Nothing in my bedding is polyester. The rest of my drapes are actually a little bit better than this one, but you know, and that's just it. To be able to get a clear, clean environment is difficult because it is so intrusive in our environment right now. There's no way to get rid of plastic in our lives at this. I have plastic, reading glasses on right now, but I do have glass beads for my earrings. So, and hemp, organic cotton hemp for all my clothing. I make all my own clothing.
Well, see, you're lucky. You know how to sew clothes.
I taught myself how to sew clothes because I bought organic clothes and then summer hit and I sweated in them, and anywhere there was a seam, my skin bubbled on it. So I started calling the companies that made the organic clothes. Oh, yes, we still use polyester thread. Mm, okay. So I went and taught myself how to sew. It was a survival tactic. And okay, and there comes what I'm wanting to actually talk about, that humanity is at a place that we have to take a huge leap. back into nature. We've come too far away from nature, and it's caused an imbalance in our own bodies and in the planet. And the huge leap that we need to take is, in some ways, backwards, and doing things in a more natural way where we are taking care of our bodies and the planet in a better way. But not only that, some of this is about what we've been talking about in some of the other podcasts about being able to raise our frequency, because it's time for an evolutionary step for mankind. And a lot of these products, I actually think, are placed there to keep us from that, because all of these are actually very low frequency products. There's studies done about hemp and linen and cotton, and what a high frequency they rate at. And then there's things in Bibles to not mix certain fabrics, because it lowers the frequency of the fabric. And this is all real studies. So some of this is also to be able to raise our frequency. I think that's one reason why we are now realizing through health and other problems that this has gotten serious, and that we have to take a step back the other way.
Interesting. I didn't know about those studies about going down all the way down to fabrics frequency.
I knew it, but one of our mutual friends from the classes in early 2000s sent me he heard about it, and he sent me a whole video on it. It was quite neat about the free. I did know about it, but it was neat to have it, just spelled out in that video.
And is it because those materials are more whatchamacallit,
Well,
nature based?
yeah, absolutely. Well, if you look at it, what do you think is going to vibe higher, rose oil or mineral oil? By the way, baby oil is made out of petroleum oil. That's what you guys are slathering on your children. But which one do you think is going to be higher frequency?
The more natural one, of course.
Rose is one of the highest frequencies of all the plants on the planet, for instance. So different plants are going to have different frequencies, but definitely aged dinosaur, you know, I found out that they call petroleum based products vegan, and I had a really big laugh out of it, because it's not vegan. If you ask me, it's dead dinosaurs. But they say as long as it's been dead 100 something years, it becomes vegan again. So, and I do not buy that. As people are like, you use leather in your bags, because I make bags and I use real leather on them. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to use the polyester petroleum based toxicity either. So somewhere we got to find, and I, not that I don't understand the ethics and the heart of a vegan. I do. I'm very empathic, so I understand that. Um, but in my own life, I can't, because so many of the vegan things go to really toxic substitutions, that there's just no way I would be able to navigate. And it's sad that they can sell things that and just call it vegan. It's kind of slapping a lie on things to get you to buy toxicity.
It's a marketing ploy, whatever. It's like words that trigger words that get people to buy stuff. Oh yeah, it's vegan.
Exactly.
Oh, it's gluten free. It's
Free.
sugar free.
I have to be gluten free because I'm celiac, and I see things and I'm like, well, yeah, spinach is gluten free naturally. You don't have to put a sign on that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you really got to read those ingredients.
And I want to encourage people to quit using any kind of fragrance products for yourself, but definitely if you have children and animals and things like that around. My daughter has several pet birds. And when she was first researching them, because she takes her animals very seriously. One time she wanted an anthill, and she researched it and actually saw it was too much work, and she didn't want to do that much work, so she chose not to do it. So she really takes this stuff seriously. And before she got her first bird, she really looked it up, and all of it, they started saying all the products you couldn't use in the home, and they were all the same products that made us sick. They were identical, including I lost a budgie when I was in the 4th grade, and that's when they came out with Teflon products. And my mom had just bought a new it was Thanksgiving Day, and she'd tried a new pan, and I didn't know back then what had killed my budgie. I now know it was those same forever chemicals that they put in Teflon. And then you heat it up and it gets into the air, and something with teeny tiny lungs breathe that, and they can't get any regular air. It's going to kill them. So a lot of empaths, a lot of highly sensitive people are already having problems with these products. And some of us have found out what it is, but some of us haven't. And that's one reason I want to say it out loud and get it even louder, because I went a year and a half of everyday migraine before I found out what was wrong. I almost crossed over. My oldest daughter was worried about me. She could only talk to me on the phone. She was in Oregon, but she could tell something was seriously wrong with me. And I almost crossed over, and there was no information available for me at all. It was through a spiritual message that I got it, and I finally realized what was actually going on in my life. The doctor I'd gone to see said, "Oh, I agree with your daughter. You've either got a brain tumor or you've got MS, but there's something wrong." She did one thing, looked at me, and said, "You can't even speak right." She could tell. And I went and did the MRI, and it's down in a town that we used to live in that I don't live in anymore, because we couldn't find any doctors in our cities. I had to wait 6 months, and she was afraid I was going to die. So she sent me down to our old hometown. And whenever I went for the MRI, I drove by the mobile home that we bought when I was 21, 22, brand new mobile home. And then I drove by the hair shop that I owned, and then I drove by the mortuary that I worked, and then I went and got the MRI. Oh, and before that, I'd stopped at a friend's house, and she had rubbed lotion on me, and I'd had this convulsion from this lotion, and I didn't know what it was. So I took a picture of this lotion. I went down, got the MRI, but had made all these things, and I'd noticed it. And then 2 days later, I was back or back where I live, and woke up that morning to meditate, and I had the thought, did you look up that lotion on EWG to see why you convulsed? And I have this thought, and I'm like, oh, I hadn't yet, and I'd meant to do it. And I went ahead and went into meditation, and whenever I do, I pretty well go. And when I was coming back into my body after the meditation, I hear, it's in all of your clothing and bedding. And that's all I hear. So I go and I take this lotion. I find out it's from Walmart, even though it says eucalyptus and it looks all natural and old fashioned, and the label did. But I typed it in and I looked it up, and in the EWG it had a D minus because it used formaldehyde for the release scent, time released, to, to provide the time released scent. And the second I saw the formaldehyde, and my head clicked to that brand new mobile home that is full of formaldehyde, the hair shop that I worked in that was full of formaldehyde, the mortuary, because people, when their family die, they want them to look like they lived in life. So the hairdresser goes to the mortuary to do the hair, and I did. The mortician saw I was good at it, so I did a lot of it. And I woke up and I realized what was going on with me.
Well, that's good. Good thing you got that message. Otherwise, I think it would take a lot longer to do process of elimination.
I don't know if I would be better now. I'm not sure I would still be here, period. And I've had some reactions to stuff since then that I've thought was going to take me off the planet. So at least I know. And even if I get, like I've been getting got here recently, and it took us a minute to find it, but at least I know I have to find my culprit. I have to find my, what is it, Superman? I know the kryptonite. I'm constantly keeping an eye out for my kryptonite, because it can sneak in some of the most, just your mail coming through. During the pandemic, they were spraying it with all kinds of cleaning chemicals. I couldn't accept a piece of mail. My husband would have to go and open it and bring it without any of the trappings into the, make sure, or air it out before we could go sit it in the sun. Luckily, I live in New Mexico. If you do have fragrance and you don't know how to get it out of your bedding, you watch this and you realize, hey, I need to start making some changes. One of the first things you do is take all your bedding, wash it without that stuff, but then put it on the line, because the sun will remove anything and everything. It is the best way to clear these toxic chemicals out of your products than anything else. Now, if you put your polyester, it's not going to take the polyester out of the polyester, but it will take the fragrance out of them.
That's kind of half the battle, really. Just getting the fragrance out of the clothing.
They're putting out in so many chemicals to make it last. What do you think they're doing? You know, you listen to these commercials and it talks about that the fresh lasts forever. Well, what are they you know, a little common sense here. What lasts forever? Oh, the PFS, the bad chemicals. That's what lasts forever. And that's what they're using is things along those lines. Maybe not exact, but some of I mean, even children's clothing can have that stuff sprayed on it to make sure that that polyester doesn't burn up overnight.
And then, like some of the detergents, where the smell lasts for like weeks.
They're using formaldehyde fixers. That's what they're using. So they're basically taking petroleum based fragrances and mixing it with formaldehyde. It's like a bomb. And it has exploded into many of our lives, not just mine. And it's been, you know, I hesitated talking about this publicly because it was hard for me to admit it. It was hard for me to deal with it. I didn't want to come first. That's not who I am.
Yeah, but I think that perhaps there's a lot of people out there who are suffering and don't even know that.
And that's why I'll get on the rooftops and scream it. I want them to know. I don't want anyone to go through what I have to find their healing. Because I do think that the inflammation that these are causing in our brains definitely it makes it more difficult. In one way I love it because if I'm channeling for somebody or if I'm reading for somebody or in session, my headache will almost take a back door until I'm done and then boom, it's right back. So the energy luckily isn't necessarily stopped in any way, shape, or form when I have a migraine or not. And it's helped my perspective in some ways that I realize that this gift that we've been given of multidimensionality is always helpful. Even if we struggle in the third dimension, doesn't mean that those other dimensional planes aren't helping and assisting us. And I actually think that some of this has happened to me so I can speak it outwards because we are working on an evolutionary step for this planet and for the humanity that lives on it. And I think one of the biggest detriments we actually are dealing with is the toxicity in our environment to be able to do that.
Yeah, but when someone is sick like that, I mean, it's really hard to try to get yourself out of that state. So even with trying to meditate or something can be difficult to raise your vibration, right?
It's very difficult. One of my dreams is to open a retreat space here and people can come stay a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in an environment that none of this stuff is on. You know, they can seek spiritually while they're here, whatever, however you see that, but give somebody a way to eliminate, because sometimes it's so hard to do it in our homes right now because all of these products are so prevalent. You know, it takes a lot of education. And I hope to someday actually put out a blog more and highlight products that are good to use and highlight ones you don't want to use, and how important it is to get over this brand loyalty that America corporations have drilled and brainwashed everybody into. That, brand loyalty is not helping us.
Okay, so if someone is sick and they're not able to raise their vibration to get to that kind of divine inspiration that you got, which was the them telling you what was the culprit.
Luckily, I was already a seeker before I ran into this major challenge, and I used the same tools that I used for seeking to get my answers for what was wrong with me. I don't know if I was lucky, if I was blessed, and I realized that not everybody has that kind of understanding or drive. Um, I honestly don't know what to say to a person. You've got to start eliminating the things in your environment, though, one by one. Eliminate something that could be that, you change something out, swap something, find a cleaner that doesn't have those ingredients. Don't use Fabuloso anymore. Don't pour the bleach all over your bathroom anymore. Find healthier ways of cleaning your space. Find healthier ways, healthier products, especially for your shampoo, conditioner, body wash, all of that kind of stuff. Buy organic bedding. uh, Always buy organic bedding. I don't If you don't wear organic clothes, that's fine, but make sure you wear, because nowadays you cannot trust them, and you do not want sheets that don't wrinkle, because that means it's covered in formaldehyde. Don't buy new cars. Buy a car at 3 or 4 years old, so that way it's plenty outgassed before you drive it. About a week after I figured it all out for myself, the rental that we were in needed a sink fixed, or a faucet, I think it was. And the plumber was sent out, really nice guy. And we got in a conversation, and I kind of told him what I had just found out. And he looks at me, and there's tears coming down his face. His face is white. And I'm like, what did I say? And he goes, you just told me why my wife is sick. I just bought her a new car. And I looked at him and I said, honestly, I'm more worried about you. Look at he had really bad dark circles under his eyes. And I said, maybe it's affecting you too and you don't see it. I actually heard he died of a heart attack a week after I had that conversation with him. But it was, kind of ironic, just me telling my story. He put two and two together, what was making his wife sick. I would imagine he made it home and told her, and I really kind of hope he did, for her sake. But another thing that happened, I went to sell all of those clothes from when I worked at the women's clothing, the high-end expensive women's clothing, and I decided I'd sell them to be able to buy some of my organic clothes. And a woman came over to look at them, and we were talking, and again I kind of tell her my story, and it was even more. She turned around, she was bawling, and I'm like, what? And she said, my husband committed suicide, and you just now told me why he did it. He had chemical sensitivities like you, but he never figured out what was wrong, and he could never get the pain under control. So there is a very high risk for suicide among multiple chemical sensitivities, people who suffer from that. It's a very high rate, because the pain is literally unbearable. And to have that come to me, to tell me within a week of me figuring all this out, was, she told me her whole, she and her kids, she and her three girls ended up in a homeless shelter because the husband couldn't take the pain anymore. The people we bought my house from in St. Louis, I realized Spirit had been trying to give me some clues for a while, and I didn't get it as quickly as I think I could have. I did know I had some chemical sensitivities. I didn't know to what level and what degree, because most of the products I use, I'd worked at Wild Oats, so almost all my personal care products were fine. I didn't realize hugging someone or cleaning my yoga studio was making me sick, because of all the products that are used there. But whenever we went to buy our house in St. Louis, the man that lived there was almost catatonic. And his wife, I found all kinds of notes after they left the house. She was seeking help for this man. She knew something was wrong and she didn't know what it was. Well, I put two and two together while I was living there. He worked for a printing press. And I'm 99.9% sure that the dementia that he suffered from was a direct cause from the inks that they used. Another experience, someone got a hold of me for a reading because they were having chronic migraines, and the doctor had told them that if they kept taking, they couldn't keep taking the abortive medication, that it's dangerous to take it that way. And someone had referred her to me, and as soon as I leaned into it intuitively, it was immediate. And I go, what are you doing Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening? You're standing in front of a printer. and because I had this flash. And she said, "Oh, we start payroll on Wednesday nights, and it's I always end up having a complete migraine by weekend." I said, "I think it's the printer at your work." And she went and threw kind of a fit about it, and they basically called her crazy and hysterical and all kinds of stuff. And the company that she worked for actually rented a space from an office, so their equipment was part of that rental. You know, when you rent the whole office space, they it was she did complain enough that they finally brought someone in to test the air in the print room, and they were giving her all kinds of grief, saying this is going to come out of your check, da 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 da, making us do all this, da 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 da. They go in, they test it. There was so much toxins in the air, they picked up the printer and carried it out of the building that moment. And they came back and apologized to her and said it was not going to come out of her payroll, and they would be buying a new printer. So,
Oof, I chills on that.
but you're asking me, how do people that don't know? I mean, this woman was suffering for a year, and it was her printer at work, and she never knew it. And that is why I wanted to speak about it today, because I don't want someone that is out there suffering to suffer a minute longer than what they have to. I want them to find relief more than anything. The two things I want on this planet is for everyone to know that they are intuitive, multidimensional beings, and that we live in a toxic environment and we need to protect ourselves.
Here, here.
And I'm very passionate.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, I feel like you sharing your story and knowledge is going to help a lot of people who are unaware of what's happening to them.
Fibromyalgia is such a little slippery fish. And the way that it's being handled right now is not okay in my book. Um, these toxins in the environment affect our lymph system, the way that the lymph moves through our body. And when you come into contact with some of these toxins, it affects that lymph and how it moves. And so you can have severe tightness in your neck, and you just think it's stress. You don't even realize you're being affected by something in so many of these things. Not to mention, you will get gaslighted. If you start realizing that this is the problem, you're going to get gaslighted left and right. No one's going to believe you. Oh, but the FDA cares about us. No, they are bought and paid for.
No, they don't care about us because if they did, they would remove a lot of the chemicals that are banned by the EU.
I went to Europe and I didn't have near the problems that I have in the US. I've had a lot of my European friends send a, "Why don't you move here?" Because I actually care about the people in the US and I would like them to know what's happening. And you're right. You know, they aren't allowed in many countries in Europe. And the ingredients on the boxes of food over there are completely different than, at least that's coming out thanks to social media. But it's the same with our beauty and cleaners and all of these other products too. And it hasn't really hit mainstream or social media where they're talking about that so much yet. So I want to bring that in too, that the FDA is 100% bought out, and they will say something is safe when it is not. So you cannot use that as a reliable source. I use the CDC because they're the ones that say that these things are sensitizers, but they put out a whole fragrance free policy and why it's so important, but then they don't even adhere to it to themselves. So, and then they say to use all of these cleaners during the pandemic that they know darn well are toxic. Half of their recommended cleaners for the pandemic had fragrance listed in them, but yet the CDC warns you about fragrance. There's just too much conflict of interest to be able to trust them. We have to trust ourselves and what our bodies are telling us. And we've got to start learning how to listen to our bodies. I think we are given so much entertainment, so many ways of distraction, that sometimes we will suffer way longer than what we should because we are more disassociated than what we are actually physically in our bodies. So rather than finding why am I discomfort, what's causing this discomfort, we seek more and more ways to escape it. It's time to come home to our bodies, to really listen to what it's trying. If there's pain, it's there for a reason. When I talk about emotions, if you're angry, you need to set a boundary. Those emotions are there for a reason. Our body and the way that it feels is there to communicate to us. We cannot even think about going and saving the world if we can't even listen to the cells of our own body.
Boundaries. Should we talk about boundaries?
Well, I kind of am. Don't let the corporations come in your house. Don't buy their products. Set a boundary. Well, it is a narcissistic relationship, and they'll gaslight you that it's not them making you sick. So I think it's applicable analogy to both ways. The direction my mind goes is to not have relationships with people who do not have your best interest at heart. And that includes what you buy. And there's only 6 different companies running all the food corporations right now. They don't have our best in there. None of those are the farmer next door who cares about the eggs he's feeding us. That's not how it's coming right now. We can make sure that that's how it's come by being more mindful and seeking it out. So, you know, using boundaries, coming back into communion with our body and start using those signals to stick up for ourselves and to create our environment in a healthy way for us. For each and every person, that's going to be different. But I think the number one thing that we can hold dear for arranging those choices is to not deal with people who don't have our best interest at heart, be it any kind of relationship.
Yeah, and we can't really change things that are happening that's, in corporate or in politics. The only thing we can change is within our environment. So that's all we can do is be knowledgeable and try to take care of ourselves better.
Upgrade our choices, being aware that we have choices, because if you watch advertising, we don't. Drop perfectionism, because that's capitalism and patriarchy. Authenticity reigns today, not perfectionism. So all of that is by learning how to make more beneficial choices for ourselves.
And that starts by being more connected.
And it starts by being more connected. And I think another thing we have to remember is we're not going to be loved by everybody,
Mm.
because we're no longer going to just be the people pleasers and the doormat. Because a lot of times when you do this work, it causes you to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm overcoming people pleaser. So being celiac really taught me, because people are very attached to their food, and they want to know why you do not want to eat their food. People are very attached, and that's something else I think we should talk about is don't be attached to the products, don't be attached to recipes. They can upgrade and they can change. I've run into a lot of stubbornness when I explain this to people, in all honesty. Oh, well, I could never give up whatever it might be. And it surprises me every time I hear it. It's like, you would rather be in excruciating pain? That's, that's what I think.
Well, I think when it hasn't happened to them, they won't wake up.
Yeah. But some of it is happening to them, and they're still so attached to whatever that product is. It's almost like an abusive relationship that you won't leave.
Well, maybe because it hasn't gotten so bad that that they're okay sticking around.
I tell people that. They're like, yeah, I'll tell them, you don't want it to get to the point it got to with me. Listen to it before it gets to that, please, for your own sake.
Well, some people can be very stubborn, so until it actually happens to them, what's
Or
happening to
somebody that they
you?
love.
Yes, exactly.
When we were going out looking for new cars, one of the used car salesmen actually turned to me and said, "Yes, and did you know that multiple chemical sensitivities almost always happens in women, not men?" I'm like, "Oh wow, he actually knows his stuff." So there are a few people out there. I was very surprised that because he's had people come in and say, "I want a car before you detail it and put the cleaners in there." I wasn't the first person to have come and asked him that. And so, and he actually cared enough that he looked into it and he learned a little bit about it. And then he saw that several of his friends that were women were having problems with it. And it's not just a woman problem. It can absolutely affect men, but it does seem to start with the women and women's hormones first. That's something else we didn't touch on. I really think, there's a lot of phthalates and other stuff in plastic and petroleum based fragrances and these personal, especially personal care products and stuff like that. And, they're talking right now that we are having some severe problems on the planet with fertility. And again, I think it's the toxicity and what they're putting in our products and what we're putting on our bodies every day and what we're eating our food out of. We need to go back to glass and ceramics and not use plastics in our food.
That makes a lot of sense because yeah, I have been hearing a lot about fertility problems that the younger generations are having, and yeah, that could be the
A lot of
culprit.
women with PCOS. It seems to be hitting. There's so many Hashimoto's and other thyroid autoimmune problems, and I really do think a lot of these are based in the toxic world, and maybe not totally, but it can
Hmm.
definitely activate those genes, just like activating the gene of cancer.
Hmm.
That's just what happens.
Mm.
So we all need to make better choices for ourselves.
Well, we can try. I don't think a lot of people have the financials. Um,
If you look at it in financial, it's going to block you. Same with travel. If you look at it as a priority, it's not going to block you. That argument gets me every time because I don't believe in it. I travel, how heavily I traveled this planet and I didn't have the money to do it. And I had weird miracles, people calling me, "Hey, I saw you in Turkey." So I went to Turkey because she bought me a ticket. Uh, I had my calling got me to all those places. I never used the money excuse. And for myself, changing the products in my household, it was life or death. So it wasn't about the money. And I had to go, I only had 2 outfits for like 2 months until I figured out what was going on and then how to sew. Um, and I don't want to ever be cold in the winter again. I figured all this out in the winter. All my bedding had to go because it was all polyester almost, and or treated cotton sheets. Yeah, I didn't know better about that stuff, and it all had to go. And I just little by little pieced it together until we're still trying to get some blankets. We still don't quite have enough blankets because natural fiber ones are more expensive than polyester ones. But for me, it's not about, the money isn't the priority. The health is the priority. It has to be.
yeah, that's a good point. If your health is a priority, then you'll make it work. It'll work
I,
out.
there are ways of doing it, and there's ways of doing it that aren't super expensive either. You can clean with vinegar and water. It's a beautiful cleaning agent. It'll clean your whole house.
It really is. I clean vinegar and water. That's what I spray for everything.
You can make that switch today.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
doesn't cost you. I buy 2 of the big bottles at Costco for no next to nothing.
Hmm. Yeah, me too.
You know, think out of the box. And also, they I don't think people are aware that they've done propaganda to keep us from buying organics. They produce propaganda just to get us to override our own knowing and our own choice. So how much is your decision being based on that propaganda that they're feeding you? I think it's important to realize that oh, that just wouldn't be convenient. They use convenience a lot in their stuff. That's why I use that word. It's a trigger word because in their patriarchal world, everyone's got to work, 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 produce, produce, produce.
I see you're not triggered at all there.
Yeah. Well, when they took us out of the kitchens and put us in the restaurants, we got way sicker. A lot more illness hit this world when we quit producing and processing our own food. When we took it out of our hands and put it in the corporations' hands. A lot of illness has come through that. My great grandparents didn't have the health problems that my father had, that my grandmother had, that I've had, because they weren't living in the toxic world that we are. My grandmother, she knew right out, she gave me a cooking lesson when I was 7, and she took me to the pantry and she pulled out a box and said, all these boxes are really hitting right now. When I was little, we didn't have boxes of food. I want you to be aware that you always read the ingredients, and if you cannot pronounce it, don't eat it.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day too, and how like our grandparents and people before them never had like all this cancer and all these health problems that we have now. It's just incredible.
And they didn't have the fertility issues that are happening in the world today. And I definitely believe it's in the level of toxicity that we are accepting into our homes and into our lives, into our food and into our clothing and into our products. And we make no mind, we are allowing it. By not taking control and making different choices, we are
Mhm.
allowing it.
We're the enablers because we keep buying their products.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I've got some I buy. I'm not perfect on that. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to say perfection. If you look at me, you're going to find problems and faults, and it's not going to be perfect, and I'm not claiming that. But I had to eliminate a lot of things before and when I did, my health bounced right back. I just want people to have their health back. That's a, I'm not meaning, I don't want to call anybody out. I'm not trying to do that. I want everyday people to feel better. I'm sharing my story, so hopefully we can avoid that in your story.
All right. I think that's a good stopping place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your knowledge and sharing your story. I think that's going to help a lot of people out there.
And if anybody wants to, I do live sessions with one-on-one with people to help find things that might be your culprits and your kryptonites. I will definitely give some financial help to people that might need that to be able to do it, scholarship them or whatnot. If somebody wants help, I'm here to help them. Find me at syndicate.com or on any of the social medias.
Well, thank you for listening to our podcast today and see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.